From the previous series, we have seen the many events that took place during the Dark Ages, or the 400 years when God didn't speak to anyone. Now let us continue to see what happened up to the coming of the Messiah, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. We left off from the Jewish sect called the Pharisees, or the separated ones, who attempted to practice purity to the fullest extent. During the 1st century before Christ, two influential Pharisaic teachers gave their names to two schools of legal thought. Hillel was the more moderate of the two, ever considerate of the poor and willing to accept Roman rule as compatible with Jewish orthodoxy. Shammai, on the other hand, was more strict in his interpretation and bitterly opposed to Rome. His viewpoint ultimately found expression in the sect of Zealots, whose resistance to the Romans brought on the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Tradition in Pharisaic thought began as a commentary on the law, but it was ultimately raised to the level of law itself. To justify this teaching, it was maintained that the oral law was given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai, along with the written law, or Torah. The ultimate in this development is reached when the Mishnah states that oral law must be observed with greater stringency than the written law. In addition to the charge that Pharisaism involved little more than a concern for the minutiae of the law, the New Testament affirms that tradition had largely neglected the real intent of the law. Pharisaism began well, and its perversion is a constant reminder that self-complacency and spiritual pride are temptations to which the pious are particularly susceptible. The Sadducees. Although Pharisees and Sadducees are frequently denounced together in the New Testament, they had little in common except their antagonism to Jesus. The Sadducees were the party of the Jerusalem aristocracy and the high priesthood. They had made their peace with the political rulers and had attained positions of wealth and influence. Temple administration and ritual were their specific responsibilities. The Sadducees held themselves aloof from the masses and were unpopular with them. The Pharisaic attempts at applying the law to new situations were rejected by the Sadducees, who restricted their concept of authority to the Torah, or Mosaic law. They did not believe in resurrection, spirits, or angels. Their faith was largely a series of negations, with the result that they left no positive religious or political system. While the Pharisees welcomed proselytes, the Sadducean party was closed. The Essenes and Pharisees both traced their roots to the orthodox leaders of Maccabean times, who stood their ground against Hellenism. Pharisees maintained a strict orthodoxy within the framework of historical Judaism. They maintained their separation from defilement, but not from the Jewish community itself. Even though the temple worship was conducted by Sadducees, the Pharisees esteemed it a basic part of their religious inheritance. While the Pharisee might hold himself aloof from sinners, he lived among them and coveted their esteem. A more extreme reaction against the influences which tended to corrupt Jewish life was taken by a sect which the ancient writers Philo, Josephus and Pliny called the Essenes. They seem to have lived for the most part in monastic communities, such as the one which maintained headquarters at Qumran, near the northwest corner of the Dead Sea. In seeking to explain Judaism to the Greek-speaking world, Josephus spoke of three philosophies, those of the Pharisees, Sadducees, and the Essenes. Nothing certain is known of the early history of the sect, for, like all reform movements, it traces its origins back to remote times. Philo states that Moses instituted the order, and Josephus says that they existed ever since the ancient times of the fathers. It is certain that the Essene movement was at one time an extreme protest against the corruptions which were apparent in pre-Christian Judaism, and that ultimately many members withdrew from the Palestinian community life and sought spiritual purification in places such as the Qumran area. Regarding themselves as the only true or pure Israel, the Essenes refused to cooperate with what they believed to be the corrupt religious observances at the Jerusalem temple. The carefully regulated life at the Essene center seems to have served as a substitute for the temple in the eyes of pious Essenes. The strictness of Essene discipline and the rigidity with which the law was enforced are stressed by all who write about them. Josephus says that they were stricter than all Jews in abstaining from work on the Sabbath. A passage in the Damascus document says that it is unlawful to lift an animal from a pit on the Sabbath. Such a view was considered extreme, even by legalistic Pharisees. Other sects. The New Testament mentions Herodians and Zealots, groups of Jews at opposite ends of the political spectrum. The Herodians appear to have been Jews of influence and standing who were well disposed to the Herodian rule and, as a result, to the Romans who supported the Herods. The Zealots, on the other hand, were super-patriots who determined to resist Rome at all costs. Their fanaticism brought on the war during which the army of Titus destroyed Jerusalem and its temple in AD 70. As always, if you would like more interesting videos like this, please like, share and subscribe.